Hey Design Basics! Let's talk about our first project. We're going to do Zentangles, and it's a nice meditative project to start with, and we've been doing a lot of research for it, so let's get going into the nuts and bolts of the project itself. Okay, Zentangles. We looked at some examples already, so I know you know what they look like, I know you know what they are, and let's talk about the prompts that we have for your Zentangles. You can do one of the following prompts. You can do a Zentangle that is a design within one circle or rectangle, and that can look like either of these. And that can be really great, especially if any of this feels overwhelming. It's nice to have a shape to contain your design in, and that way it's kind of thought out for you. But you can also do a Zentangle design with overlapping circles or, comparable shapes. So it kind of looks like these two, where you can do a little more variety and a little more problem solving in your design. So if you want to do something like that, you're welcome to. And then the last prompt would be making a Zentangle where the patterns and designs kind of tie into a theme such as space or your life story or landscapes. And I don't have any photographs of those, I'm sorry. But we have had girls in the past who've done examples, who've done Zentangles where they've themed it around nature or with some other interest of theirs. So we'll pick one of those prompts, and that's how you're going to start this project. And our learning goals, only 3. It's to demonstrate that you know diverse lines and patterns. That's the most important one because that's what we've been working on with your line doodles and your pattern research. So, for instance, let's look at ones that are not successful. Zentangle on the left has different directions of line, which is really nice, but that line thickness is not changing whatsoever. So that's very, ultimately kind of like a boring look to that work. The way they have their patterns laid out is interesting. The patterns do change a little bit, but the line does not vary in thickness at all. It's all the same, just like the pen, like the size of the pen that made them. And that's not enough interest. So you want to be able to diversify your lines. And then the one on the right, the patterns are kind of all the same field of black, dark patterns. And they all do vary a little bit. But you just don't see that and think variety. That's not what variety is looking like. So these are 2 examples of how not to do it, and then all these examples in this PowerPoint show you a lot of ones that are successful. Let's go back to, so for balanced composition, let's talk about that for a second. So both of these examples have kind of like one main area that gets really dark. For the one on the left, it's kind of a little more in the center. It's a little off-center. That's still successful because even though it's not symmetrical, it still feels balanced. The center gets dark and kind of gray, and then the outer patterns get a little bit lighter. But the Zentangle on the right, it's really just all the darkness is on the left, and then beyond that, there's just not a lot of balance happening, not a lot of darkness to balance out that big field on the left-hand side. So here we have left is kind of working, and the right side is not successful with a balanced composition. Now, no matter which prompt you pick, and for all the learning goals, we all have the same requirements in this part. It's kind of like the basic outlines. You should all use between 8 to 15 patterns. No less than 8 because less than 8 is just not going to look very full or interesting. You can do more than 15 if you really want to. I suggest not doing more than 15 because we will have only so many class days to complete this, and that will take more time. However, if you look at your Zentangle and you're thinking, I really think this would look better with 16, 17, 20 patterns, totally your choice. You don't need permission to do that. But you don't want to have less than 8. And you also want to make your design the clear majority of the page. So what that means is that when you make your artwork, there shouldn't be more empty white space than space with a design on it. And let's look at some examples of that. The one on the left does have white space, right? There's white space up here, and it's kind of a lot. Same with this bottom corner. But that's fine, because ultimately this is balanced in the composition, and there's not more white space than design. But here, even though this is kind of a nice little Zentangle, this white space around it is probably equal to or more than the design. And you don't want to have that. You want to have there be no question that your design is the majority of the page. Not necessarily all of it. You're welcome, and I encourage you to have margins around your work, but you shouldn't have a super small design. And then additionally, when you think of your design, it has to be original. So although patterns may be sourced from other artists or the internet or whatever, that's totally fine. I don't expect you to make up all your own patterns. You may not look at someone else's work and just copy it. That's plagiarism. Um, you also shouldn't look at someone's work and just make only a few changes. That's almost like the same as paraphrasing but not citing their work. So you want to make sure you have an original design. If you have questions about what that means, feel free to ask me, but hopefully that is something that you will understand. Original design is more important than anything else because that's going to make you do the most amount of problem solving with this work. And lastly, everyone's work needs to have their name printed in pencil on the bottom right corner. If your name's not printed, it just makes it so much harder to grade, it delays grading, and then it also makes it really hard to get your work back to you if I collect it for the art show. We're still struggling returning work from last year actually because I was out on maternity leave, and the work that was done by students I never had isn't signed, so it makes things really complicated. Always sign your work bottom right hand corner in pencil, and please print. So no artist signatures just yet, no like scribblies. Make sure it's printed. So that's the basics of the project. That's the learning goals, the prompts you can pick from, and the requirements of the project. This is also all going to be written down in Canvas if you like that format better. And the way we're going to start is, like everything else, you're going to make a sketch in your sketchbook first. You're going to make a first draft. We pretty much do that with all of our major projects as a draft in our sketchbooks. And then this draft is meant to be evolved. It's not meant to be you make in your sketchbook, then you just do exactly that on your final piece of paper. That's not how we build creativity. A lot of you said you want to get better at being creative as one of your learning goals for the course. And the way you actually get better at being creative is you kind of sit on an idea for a little while and ruminate on it, and then let your brain problem solve it inactively. Then when you come back to it, you have much better ideas. So you're going to make a design in your sketchbook, and you'll have some time away from that when you're at home. And then you're going to actually make 3 improvements to it before you make your final draft. You're going to note what those improvements are on the page that you drew it on. So that way we're all clear about what you think your improvements will be. You're allowed to make more than 3 changes. You can make as many changes as you want, but there should be at least 3 improvements to your design. And that's our Zentangle project.